Hi, Scott M.A.S.K Comics here, how you doing? So, as I said in the last video that I did, which was on issue number 1, I was going to try and make a few videos on the same day. So in today's video, it's going to be issue number 2. However, because I've just done my last video, that you just saw, that was about half an hour long, that now means that my coffee is cold. So I'm going to have to make another one. So why don't you take this opportunity, go put the kettle on, and we can watch this all together. Thank you. Hiya, welcome back. So hopefully you should have a hot coffee now and are ready to delve into issue number 2. So issue number 2, as it says, every fortnight, 8th to the 21st of November 1986. It's still got a tagline saying TV favourite, so obviously you know we're going to look out for the cartoon as well as collect the toys, as well as read the comic and everything else that goes along with it. Now, as I previously said in the last video, this one comes with a free Miles Mayhem mask of Viper. Again, like the other one, it came in a poly bag with the Viper mask, couple of elastic bands you hoop around your ear to put it on. So on the cover of this one we now have Switchblade with Miles Mayhem gloating that you'll enjoy this issue, Venom hardware on the cover and centre page, and you get a free Viper mask. Now the image of Switchblade swooping in again is very similar to the image of Switchblade on the back of the preview issue. There are some slight minor differences, but it's very much the similar image. Great detail on it. Now, one thing that M.A.S.K became quite known for on the covers, as well as being full wraparound covers, is they became their own little story. So basically we have Miles Mayhem obviously gloating 1 minute, and then the next minute he's going, whoa, whoa, what's happening? Put me down, this is supposed to be a Venom cover. We turn to the back. I know it seems a bit strange, we're doing a review on a comic and we're doing the back page before we even dive in, but it's obviously part of the comic. So we've got Matt Tracker and Bruce Sattel on the back cover. Miles Mayhem thinks he's taken over this issue. Not as long as M.A.S.K is around, he won't. M.A.S.K's on. So Matt Tracker uses Ultra Flash and Bruce Sattel uses Lifter. Again, we see some great detail in their fatigues, great detail in the masks, and this is really what sets it apart from some of the other M.A.S.K material that you might see, is the actual quality of the imagery is outstanding. Now, again, this issue that I've got is a second-hand one. Now, although it's second-hand, it's actually in very good condition, and it's quite hard to open up the pages. I don't think it's been read very much. So we started off some new stories last week, last fortnight, and we're now going to start off another new story. This one is called Monster Mountain. We have the distinctive pink tinge that they like to use in the first cell. So we've got Matt Tracker taking Scott and T-Bob into the Frankenstein Museum, which is found at Gishmühl in the Bavarian Alps. Excuse my language if I've pronounced that incorrectly. T-Bob has some issues with some of the guards at the beginning that he's trying to show his tickets to. turns out that they're just waxwork dummies, and then Matt plays a little prank on T-Bob that frightens him, and he ends up hanging from the portcullis. Bit of a shame, but he does do that occasionally in the comics. We then move on to Miles Mayhem, Cliff Dagger and Sly Rax. So they're obviously unloading a very heavy box, as Cliff Dagger says, from Jack Hammer, which is then getting put on top of the submarine section of Piranha. Miles Mayhem explains part of the plan, that this is a very sufficient, powerful, blasted warhead that they're putting on there, and they're putting it underneath in some tunnels in a mountain. So Sly Rax is getting the job of having that put on, but I believe he's quite adverse to some weaponry, although I thought Cliff Dagger was the weapons expert, but never mind. So it goes on top of the sidecar of Piranha, and Sly Rax heads off into the centre of the mountain because only his vehicle is small enough to fit. Now, it seems like the box that this weapon is very heavy, yet only one person goes in to deal with it, so you would have thought it would have needed the two people to actually get it unloaded from Piranha once it got there. We then go back to Matt, Scott and T-Bob being shown around the Frankenstein museum. T-Bob now knows, obviously there's a lot of dummies and stuff, so he jumps on top of the Frankenstein dummy as it kind of wakes up and frightens him, not realising it's full of animatronics. The tour guide then explains about a thing called the Giant of Geshmill, and we then see this big massive picture of this Cyclops up in the wall, and this is the story behind Frankenstein. Matt is then corrected when he says that he's got a bigger imagination than the guy who wrote Frankenstein, to which the tour guide corrects him that it was actually a female who wrote the story of Frankenstein, called Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. So it then goes on, they then continue on some of their tour through some grotesque areas, and this is the thing, some of the scenes in some of the comics is actually quite, for a child, very grotesque, but we'll move on. So we then see Sly Rax, he's reached his destination, he's unloading the weapon that doesn't seem to be quite as heavy now. As I said, he's managed to do it. And the idea is this is going to explode, it causes a volcano, and then it melts some ice. But we're then left hanging, as we then have to wait until the next issue to find out what happens. Starting off in last week's issue, we then move on to part 2 of The Great Head Robbery, which was a black and white story. It's now a colour story. So we see Switchblade still with the Statue of Liberty's head. We see Scott now fully back from being unconscious from the last issue, and T-Bob still trying to remember exactly what it is that he's got to tell him. So, if I can turn the page. So T-Bob converts to motor scooter mode again, and Scott reminds him that he's got to go and get Bruce. So Thunderhawk is still trapped under the pylon from last week. All the lights are still out, all the power's still out. Bruce Sato turns up with his lifter mask, and he uses it to get the pylon off of Thunderhawk, moves it to one side, and then we've got it. So what then happens is Scott then remembers exactly what it is he's got to tell everyone. And he says, "An attack on the Statue of Liberty. She's lost her head. She's lost her head." And Matt quips back, "And you're out of yours, T-Bob. Take that robot away and service it, Scott." So then T-Bob starts crying some oily tears. So obviously it must be true. What happens next is that Matt changes his whole outfit so that he can use Ultra Flash. I'm not too sure if that's needed, but I know that in the comic, I think it's in the cartoon, I'm sure there was one episode where he went from using one mask to another and he ended up wearing different clothes as well. I don't know if this was part of the agreement with Kenner, that they had to use the fatigues that went with the mask and the vehicles that went with the mask, etc., etc. But certainly he's changed his fatigues, because we still have our blackout. He's going to use ultra flash to light up to make sure to see if the head is actually there, and of course it is. The following day, power is resumed. Everything seems to be back to normal. However, the head of the Statue of Liberty turns round, and the next thing we see some firing coming out of its mouth, and the Lower Manhattan Police Precinct building is blown to pieces and falls to bits. So obviously the M.A.S.K team is called in, and Matt Tracker goes, "We should have listened to T-Bob all along, Scott. Liberty's real head has been replaced by a fake one." Well, is it a fake one? Or have they just put a weapon inside the original one and put it back on? How do we know it's fake? I'm not too sure. It's a question, isn't it? So we're never going to get the answer now. So we then see Miles Mayhem and Cliff Dagger inside the head now, and a couple of police helicopters are advancing on the Statue of Liberty. So Cliff Dagger climbs up some stairs so he can get a better vantage point from the statue's eyes, and uses his torch mask to blow them out of the sky. We're then left wondering what happens next. So we then move to a black and white strip called Snake Farm. So Matt Tracker is also, as it says, engineer and M.A.S.K leader. Matt Tracker has designed and built the most ambitious P&A project of the 20th century. A fully automated factory producing advanced agricultural androids for use in poverty-stricken countries overseas. Now, the president of the P&A himself comes to inspect. We don't learn the name of the president, so we're not too sure if it's Dwayne Kennedy or not. I'm not too sure if he's still the president or if he was the president, but certainly Dwayne Kennedy is featured in the cartoons. We then see some images of some of the droids that he has created. I have a book that I got when I was younger, still have it. It's a US born book of the future, I think it's called. And some of these images of some of these robots do resonate with me, that perhaps these are similar pictures to that book, or maybe they're based on a similar idea. It might even be the same artist who did both, I'm not too sure. We then also find out that in order to protect the robots, why they would need protected, I'm not too sure, but we have some over-the-top droids with some big guns to help protect these other droids. It seems a bit OTT, because there's factories everywhere that produce things like cars, planes, etc. Why would some robots need some protection, especially such intense protection as that? I'm not too sure. Now, one thing I have mentioned before is the quality of the artwork in the comic. On the next page, we have Miles Mayhem and Cliff Dagger and Jackhammer smashing through the doors. So perhaps, obviously, they do need the protection and have maybe just over-egged it. So they're smashing through the doors, and we then see an image of Jackhammer. So Jackhammer, we have the Venom logo on it, we've got all guns blazing. The detail in the weaponry, the detail in some of the components of the vehicle from the toy is just awesome. I would say that the guns on the gun turret have maybe been made slightly bigger than what they are in the toy, just to overemphasize how powerful it actually is. But nonetheless, in black and white especially, I don't think this would have been as good had it been in colour. And I think that's one of the things that even when I was a kid and I was trying to do my own drawings, I was never very good with colours, but certainly when it came to doing the black and white, once I then added colour to it, I thought, nah, I've just ruined it. But certainly this does look awesome. So we've gone from that to now they're facing off against some of these warrior robots. So there's a whole load of them coming towards them. So we see Torch in action, burning some of them. Miles Mayhem doing some acrobatic trickery to get out of the way of Torch. then using his Viper mask with some corrosive poison to destroy them. Again, the artwork in this is phenomenal. We move to this scene of Miles Mayhem turning round as it's spitting the corrosive Viper. Now, the actual poison as it comes out is moving through the air, very much like a snake would move on the ground, and it's just awesome. The detail again on his fatigues, he's got his holster, he's got his mask, we see Cliff Dagger in the background, the actual destruction to the robots is just phenomenal. So what happens is, after they destroy the robots, they then steal the agricultural robots to take them away to turn into weapons. Why not just take the robots that are already weapons, that are guards, and just reprogram them? Anyway, so they steal the robots, the agricultural robots, and obviously Matt and Alex are on the scene. Now, Alex has found a clue. Alex has found a clue in the Venom, because we do know that he obviously his job is working with animals, and he deduces that the Venom from the Viper mask can only come from one region in Asia. So Bruce Sato and Matt Tracker and Thunderhawk then blast off. Now Bruce is driving, flying Thunderhawk should I say. We then see Miles Mayhem milking some venomous snakes. Matt Tracker jumps out of Thunderhawk and uses the free fall ability. We then have a native who looks after snakes for him, saying, "Flee, master, your life is in peril." "Not so, Tracker is tricky, but I can be trickier still, stand aside." So what then happens is as Matt Tracker comes in, not too sure why he's taking his mask off at this point, but we then see Miles Mayhem with snakes, throwing the snakes at him, and he says he's actually immune to the deadly bite, so obviously he's worked with them long enough, or maybe he takes antibodies, but certainly he is immune to them. So we then see Bruce Sato coming to the rescue with Thunderhawk, firing away and stopping the snakes from getting towards Matt Tracker. At the end, we then see Miles Mayhem floating away in a little craft, which is quite cool, never seen it before. It then says Android Assault in issue 5. So we've got to wait to issue 5 to see what happens next. Then we move on to the centre pages. So now that we've reached the centre page, again, we already knew from the cover what we were going to expect. We're going to expect Switchblade to be in the centre pages. So we've got Switchblade, we've got it in helicopter form, and then we've got it in the jet mode as well. So the helicopter pursuit plane of Venom's ruthless and cold-blooded leader Miles Mayhem. As a helicopter, torpedo bombs are released. When converted to jet, the Switchblade fires 2 Stinger rockets. Additional armaments are 2 recessed nose cannons and a pair of cannons concealed in the skids. Now, in the last video, I made mention of some of the things that I wasn't too keen about the relationship, some of the terms that they use, it sounded very much Transformers. But this has a word in here that is unnecessary when they say this Switchblade. It should just be called Switchblade. If you had a dog, you'd call it the dog. But if the dog was called, I don't know, Sylvester, you wouldn't say the Sylvester, you'd just say Sylvester, the dog. So I don't see the need for that word in there. Now it says pilot Miles Mayhem and M.A.S.K Viper. So all the way through, as we're building up, we're finding out more and more information about M.A.S.K. So we saw Thunderhawk in the last issue, we'll see Rhino in the next issue, in this one we're seeing Switchblade. So this is a great way of giving you the information in a sort of data file. Allows you to build up your knowledge of M.A.S.K. Maybe like me, you didn't actually have the toys. Certainly on the toy box it tells you what it does, who the person is, what the mask does. So for someone like myself, who was a 13-year-old being told I wasn't allowed toys, this was great for me. I was picking up so much information about it. Now, like the image of Thunderhawk in the previous issue, again, I love this picture. But part of me, there's something about it that I'm not too keen on. I can't quite put my finger on it. I'm not too sure if it's the layout. I'm not too sure if it's the way the background's done. I'm not 100% sure. But very much like the Thunderhawk one, it has some similarities. I'm guessing it may have been the same artist, but this one isn't signed, so perhaps it wasn't. But yeah, so overall it's very good. But there's just one wee quibble about it I can't quite put my finger on. Now, we then move to the War of Venom Part 2. We've got a green tint to the first cell, which I think does marry up quite nicely because you've got some soldiers coming out. It would marry up perhaps with the uniforms they might be wearing that might be green, but obviously Mayhem's uniform is now green as well, which we know isn't green. So he's helping to start a civil war in a country called Tigmula against the neighbouring state of Sanjuria. So as the troops battle in, Mayhem has reinstated the deposed dictators that we found about from the last issue. So the Tigmulian army has launched a surprise attack on a Sanjurian border town, and the only thing that stands in the way is our brave heroes in M.A.S.K. Now, for those of you, one of the good things about this story for many of you will be the fact that there's no Scott and T-Bob. I know how reviled they are. So what then happens is we then see the M.A.S.K team being split up. There's various fronts on the war territory. So we then see Dusty Hayes and Honda McClane in Gator. It gives us a little bit of information because Dusty mentions a line about cooking pizza, and Hondo makes a quip about Captain Cook. So we then get a little side note to say in civilian, Hondo's a history teacher and Dusty's a pizza cook and delivery man, which very much marries up with the cartoons. Even though we don't very often see them in these roles in the comics, if ever, then yes, we do that. So what then happens is Dusty is doing a wee bit of stunt driving to get Gator into action, but as they come around a bend, there's a sort of tank type vehicle with some guided missiles on it. So obviously Dusty's aware that he's not going to be able to dodge them no matter how good his driving is. However, Hondo uses Gator's energy ball cannon. So they use these terms in their conversations so we get used to what it is that's actually happening, what the device is called, so that we pick up some more information about the vehicles. So it blows up the tank, and then we see Hondo using a few laser blasts guided by his blaster mass internal guidance system to blow up some part of a bridge. Because there's more tanks coming across. However, more of the critters, as Dusty calls them, are making their way in boats. So he launches Gator's hydroplane, knocks them into the water, and faces off against some guys with some machine guns. And it turns out that he can heat up the water as Gator's water cannon can also boil water. Now, I'm not too keen on this let's make everything possible scenarios. I think if you have some restrictions on what you can and can't do, then it makes it more, it makes the not the terror but the suspense, and it builds it up a bit more if you know that they're in more danger. The whole thing about, like, when I used to watch Knight Rider, as many of you probably did, was it's amazing how he always got Kit always got some new development at the beginning of the episode that was then required at the end of that episode, and then very rarely ever saw the light of day ever again. So what then happens is there's then some jets flying around, and Alex Zepto comes on the scene and says, "Leave this to me," to which Dusty quips, "I wondered where that crazy Brit had got to." So I think there's also some confusion that some people don't realise that Alex Sector is meant to be English, hence some of the language that he uses. I was watching a YouTube video the other day there when someone was talking about Alex Sector and his accent, and they couldn't understand what he was saying some of the time, but he is meant to be English. Now, the other thing is, so he takes off in Jackrabbit after these jets. I'm not quite sure exactly what he was planning to do once he got into the air up beside these jets, because obviously Jackrabbit as a mask is great, it gives you the power of flight, but what weapon is he going to use to take a couple of jets out there? I'm not too sure. But we don't find out anyway, because as he's about to take off, a fighter plane comes straight towards him, and then that's where we're left hanging. The advert that appeared in the last week's comic with the Rhino and Switchblade is in this comic yet again. We then move on to the letters page. So we've got some letters which have been edited by Miles Mayhem and some by Matt Tracker. So Matt Tracker says, "Welcome to the world of M.A.S.K. As you can see in each of the stories, my M.A.S.K organisation is going to be hard pressed to stop that evil genius Miles Mayhem. But with your backing, I'm sure we'll triumph in the end. Printed below is the first selection of your letters and comments. This will be a regular feature, and there's £5 for the sender of each item we publish." Then Miles Mayhem retorts, "Welcome to my world, the world of Venom. Ignore the ramblings of Tracker. I'm sure you'll only be writing to me. I want to receive more letters than that mass nobody. So write to me today. I want drawings, comments, news about Venom victories, anything. I've also got £5 postal orders waiting to be won. So what are you waiting for? Get writing, you Venom recruits." Now, a postal order. I don't even really know how to explain that, as I've never actually had one. But certainly, when you were sending money back in the old days, before internet banking and whatever, you didn't really want to send a £5 note or a £10 note in the post in case it went missing, or in case the postie was a bit unscrupulous and stole the money if he knew there was money in it. A postal order, I believe you bought it from the post office. I think it had some sort of signature on it. It was slightly different to a cheque. But I'm not too sure how they fully worked. If anyone knows, if you can let me know, because I'm 47 now, marbles are going a wee bit, I can't really remember how they worked. We then have an advert for some Doctor Who fans for some Doctor Who What's This and Golden Wonder Variety Pack crisps, and some comics. Okay, so we then move on to the Key of Solomon Part 2. We've got the blue tint in the first cell. So, following on from the last issue, they had just reached the British Transit. So they had just transported some stuff to the British Museum. Venom turned up, started blowing up some buildings, and the building was coming down on top of some people. So Bruce Sato is on the case with his lifter mask, and obviously the image of Bruce Sato as we first see him with his lifter mask on is brilliant. We see the detailing of his fatigues. It looks amazing. So obviously he uses lifter, stops people from getting hurt. We then see Dusty using his backlash mask against Switchblade, knocking that off course, and Mayhem quips, "I'll be out of action until I get the chopper back under control." We then see Condor turn up, and there's a battle going on, and we see both Jackhammer and Piranha. Now, eventually, Matt Tracker turns up just as the fire brigade are there putting out some flames. We've got some people getting stretchered into the back of ambulances on the bridge. No, sorry, let me rephrase that. Sorry, Matt Tracker's still back at the bridge, that was getting destroyed. But now the emergency services have turned up, he's able to leave to go to the museum. So he takes flight to go to where the real action is, as he says. He arrives, but by that time it's too late. Everything has all happened. Venom have gone. but they've also ransacked the back of the trucks that had the museum exhibitions in. So Bruce lets them know that everything's gone, but when they get there it turns out not everything is gone. Everything is still there, apart from one item. So as he explains, only one piece of the collection was missing, a Chinese bronze wine vessel from the Shang dynasty. And the person who's speaking to him, Mr. Hansard, replies back, in the shape of an owl. Yes, I know the piece, but it's worth nothing compared to the other pieces. So Matt does a little search on his computer, and it turns out there's been recent thefts from museum exhibits. And it turns out that everything that's been stolen is very, very low value. So, with these random thefts, Mayhem must have a shopping list from somewhere of all of these treasures, and he discusses with Mr. Hansard a crook by the name of the Toff, who is currently in jail. So a plan is set in motion with the resident master of disguise, Buddy Hawks, then pretends to be the Toff. We have this scene outside of a prison with some guard dogs to give the impression that the Toff has escaped from prison. He then makes his way to Paris, which is also where he is best known for being. Mayhem grabs him, tells him that he needs his expertise. He is offered £200,000, which is half of the payment, and if you find it and steal the false Cali of the Kush. So just before Buddy Hawks, in disguise as a Toff, leaves, he's then introduced to an old friend of his, which is Steady Jones, who he shared a prison cell with. We then see Buddy's thoughts of, that's blown it then, Miles might think I'm a Toff, but I'll never fool a lifelong friend at close range. So we then go on to a bit about the following issue, and that's the end of that one. So again, I'm starting to get into M.A.S.K by this point. Certainly the cover, very bright, very vibrant. The picture I said of Jackhammer smashing through the gates, the image of Miles Mayhem spinning around using the Viper mask. All the information that I'm starting to learn about Switchblade, the masks, etc. is all helping me to now know that I want to maybe read the next one to see what it's like, and certainly I did, as you will have known by now, but that is for another day. Thanks for watching.